I have the same observation. We actually use all three clouds
Mm-hmm.
in different proportions. The majority is on AWS, but some of the data engineering workloads are running on Google Cloud because the data analytics offerings that come out of the box seem to be having more breadth and more depth and higher
Mm-hmm.
quality of the features, right? And so the engineers, they have to relearn, right? Instantiating a virtual machine on AWS works a little bit differently from GCP, right? And then and if you go to Azure, you can run something with DTUs. Those are processing units. And something that uses processing units, for example, cannot use a reservation on the Azure side, right? So again, it's different. High level, yes, they are all virtual machines, right? But
Yeah.
how they actually work differs from cloud vendor to cloud vendor.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
It also impacts the automations, right? Because when
Yes.
you're shutting down in AWS, not the same as shutting down in Azure. When you need to deallocate in order to save, and this is a very important topic and a very important item that people need to know. Not only the DevOps, but also the FinOps, right? When they're analyzing all the optimizations that can be done in the automation.
Yeah, for example, a good example here is on the Azure side, if you have a database, right, and let's say you are an organization that only works from like 8 to 6 p.m., right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're not really international, you don't really have engineers in other countries working, right? On the Azure side, what you do is you actually reduce the compute units for your database to the point where it is still running, it could still do like one query a minute, right? But it cannot handle the workload at peak. And then in the morning, you basically increase the processing units so that the database is able to handle the daily workloads, right? Which is something that you can't do on AWS or GCP, right? So again, there's differences, substantial differences, and you need to know how to take advantage of the elasticity of the cloud.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I mean, that's what we are also seeing is that coming from the, let's say, FinOps engineering perspective, so people that are used to do like more hands-on optimizations, such as the one that you mentioned about automation, that you actually need to have the cloud knowledge to actually implement those. And that's what we are seeing. Like what we try to do is to increase the content and increase the awareness of that. It needs to be some technical content regarding that, so that people are better in these practices. In being able to how to reduce the compute capabilities automatically from 6 p.m. So you need a script for
Yeah.
doing that, and how do you learn to do that script? And that's content that I think it's left to do in the finance perspective, but it's something that definitely is worth, especially for like more engineering FinOps perspective.
Yeah, and I agree. This is why I think that certifications are so immensely helpful, right?
Hmm.
Because you do get formal training, right? And some of the training that you receive, at least the foundational things, they will stay with you, and then you know what you need to watch out for and where to get more information and when you need to get help, right? So if you have a big project coming up where you need to start a new workload, you know that there's a solutions architect that I can possibly invite to my project, and we can, whiteboard a couple of approaches of how we want to do that and get the feedback from the solutions architect.
Yeah, and other thing I was the other day it was at a meeting in Berlin. I joined remotely, and I was talking about trends for 2025. And one thing that I want to mention when I was drafting the presentation is that there is and what you mentioned about certifications is that there are specialties more or less in every pillar that from the well architected framework. So there is networking, there is security,
Databases.
all this stuff. Do you think it should be or it should happen in the near future that there is a certification of an specialty in cost optimization and in sustainability? Because it seems like there are two topics that are, forgotten in that area, and I think it's super interesting that the providers could give a certification on that.
You actually touch on a really important point, right? In a sense, yes, those certifications are required. And interesting story, I actually worked with AWS on a cloud financial management certification. However, because it would directly compete with the FinOps Foundation, it was decided that not to proceed to offer this. Right? Because you can get a FinOps practitioner or FinOps engineer certification from the FinOps Foundation. And around sustainability, maybe there is something similar, right? Similar organizations where you can get sustainability certifications. Hopefully, they are technical enough for the specific cloud vendors, right? A sustainability certification for AWS will look different from GCP and from Azure. But overall, I think, yes, that is important. At some point, I also have a thought where cost and sustainability, there's a lot of synergies between the two, right?
Yeah.
If you are optimizing for sustainability, you also often optimize for cost. Region specific, right? If you move something to a more sustainable region, maybe it's also cheaper at that point, right? And there's a lot of synergies. However, at the foundation, I don't see these merging. Rather, the foundation may offer a sustainability certification, but I'm sure that there is many other organizations that already offer something like that. So it wouldn't make sense to compete with it.
No, that's super. I think I wanted to know the thoughts because when I was drafting this, I was come to my mind like, yeah, why there isn't there are these four pillar or well, these six pillars and there are only I think three, four. I don't recall the number of specialties now. There are a huge amount of them, and now with AI even more. But yeah, that's really insightful. I think people will know now the reason behind it definitely.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that everybody actually thought about it. When I finished one of the first, I think was in AWS, one of my first, I asked the same. Why don't you have a badge for a? But I didn't get so deep. I never, I didn't know the answer back in those time. But yeah, well, I guess that we are now now that we are in Christmas time. Uh, it's a good question for you, Vito, to tell us what do you think or what do you wish or what do you think will happen next year in the FinOps? What do you see what will develop? How do you see FinOps developing next year?
I mean, FinOps, let me actually look this up because we have a roadmap. So I can tell you exactly what the focus will be. So implementing Focus. Focus is the a cloud agnostic billing format, right? So that's going to be one of the things that next year we are going to focus on. FinOps scopes. So scope could be FinOps for the data center, FinOps for the cloud, FinOps for SaaS, FinOps for AI, those kind of things. Cloud sustainability is another focus. FinOps for AI, we are actually thinking of a certification for that as well. Then FinOps aware product decisions. So this is all about shifting left, right? Before you design your solution, start thinking about cost. So cost on the timeline is being positioned early on at the beginning of the design, not like once the design is done, you try to make it cost efficient, right? And the last of the six items that we are going to focus on is the public sector. There's a lot of cloud usage in the public sector. All the schools, all the libraries, every city, every county, and every state, and then the federal government with its military, right? They're all using cloud. And there are some restrictions, like, for example, the budget is approved on an annual basis. So you get like X amount of million budget, right? However, when you buy a reservation, you make a commitment for 3 years. So now you are unable to buy these reservations because technically you don't know what your budget will look like in year 2 and year 3.
That's super interesting, and thanks for the
Yeah.
insight on the roadmap. Yeah, definitely public sector is. I'm seeing from the subscription base that there are a lot of people from universities, schools, and counties, which surprised me at the beginning. But definitely, I when I started to dig deep into the news as well, there was a contract from a large consulting company with the Air, I believe it was the Air Force of the US. So, and also I've seen several things about the US strategy was one of the numbers, and the Home Department of the UK as well. They are starting working on the FinOps. So yeah, definitely interesting things on the public sector as well.
Public sector and big companies as well. All products are very strict with yearly budgets. I think they have the same issues. And it is very interesting. Thank you for sharing with us.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Again, for me, it was very insightful, and Dieter, was a pleasure to have you here with us. Looking forward to see you again in the future, sharing with us more ideas and stories and roadmap. And again, I hope you had a good time.
Absolutely. And thanks for inviting me, and happy to talk again.
Yeah, it was a pleasure, Dieter. We will leave all the links regarding your website and everything that you do on the description of the podcast. And we hope we could have a future episode in 2025 for sure.
Of course, looking forward to it.
Okay. So then, both of you have a happy new year because we are on the dates, and see you next time.
All right, take care.